This is CNN Breaking News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. President Trump just wrapped up an event in West Virginia where he made a number of outrageous and some untrue claims. He was supposed to have been talking about tax cuts, but at one point the president literally tossed his prepared remarks into the air. We're now in a new phase of the Trump presidency where many in the White House are sorely feeling the absence of aides such as Hope Hicks. And this chaos that the president is embracing is not just evident in the explosions of questionable remarks and tweet storms. It's also apparent in policy decisions, and it's affecting the president's personnel decisions. And on that last subject, we have breaking news on that right now and what could potentially be the president's boldest and perhaps most baffling staffing move yet, as EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt comes under increasing fire for a series of potential ethical lapses amidst headline after headline prompting questions from Republicans in Congress and even White House officials about whether Pruitt should keep his job. CNN has learned that President Trump is as of now not backing away from EPA Administrator Pruitt. In fact, quite the opposite. CNN's Pamela Brown is live at the White House. And Pamela, what are you learning?
Well, Jake, we've learned that President Trump floated replacing Attorney General Jeff Sessions with embattled EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt as recently as this week, even as Pruitt faced a growing list of negative headlines about ethics concerns. In fact, one source I spoke with said the president was trying to protect Pruitt as his fill-in for Sessions. Now, the president is known to float several people a day for multiple positions in his administration that are already occupied. But this proposition, Jake, this week reveals how confident he has, the confidence he has that remains in Pruitt, despite a dizzying number of ethics issues that have come to light. Now, asked by a reporter as he boarded Air Force One if he still has confidence in Pruitt, the president simply said, "I do." Pruitt has remained in Trump's good graces for the most part, though a source familiar tells me that the president's confidence in him has faltered a bit in light of the bad headlines surrounding these ethics issues. However, he is hesitant to fire him because he likes entertaining this idea of replacing Sessions with him eventually and feels confident that he will continue to advance his agenda at the EPA. We should note the White House would only say today in response to our story that there are no personnel announcements at this time.
At this time, of course. What about Chief of Staff Kelly? Does he have the same amount of confidence in Pruitt?
Well, sources tell me and my colleague Caitlin Collins that Chief of Staff Kelly has not matched the president's confidence in Pruitt. He has advocated for firing him before the headlines get worse. And a source familiar with how things have unfolded said that Kelly called Pruitt Tuesday morning to ask if there were any other issues that could become public that he needed to know about. Now, these feelings were further deepened after Pruitt did several interviews with Fox News as well as the Washington Examiner, which a senior administration official said only made matters worse. And one source I spoke with said if more negative headlines about Pruitt come out, that could be the final straw, Jake.
I have seen a couple just in the last few minutes. This all, I have to say, this idea that he maybe wants to replace Jeff Sessions at the Justice Department with Pruitt, this really underscores the president's focus and preoccupation with this issue of Sessions and Rosenstein and the Russia probe.
That's right. In fact, even if he's not tweeting about it, behind the scenes he's talking about it. That chatter continues about ousting both of them, Jake. Multiple sources familiar with his thinking tell me and my colleague Caitlin Collins, but his advisors have repeatedly tried to thwart this by convincing him that doing so by firing Sessions, it would be damaging in the midterms given how popular he is with conservatives. These same advisors have also argued that firing Rosenstein could delay the completion of the special counsel Robert Mueller's obstruction of justice probe while creating unwanted headlines. But the president has especially focused his frustration on Rosenstein in recent weeks, often repeating his complaint that he is weak and not on his team. Sources familiar with the president's grievances have told us that Rosenstein resurfaced as a source of the president's wrath because of a photo of him dining with Sessions and Solicitor General Noel Francisco at a popular Washington restaurant. But Trump has repeatedly complained about firing many in his administration, Jake, as you well know, and it doesn't necessarily mean he will.
And it doesn't mean he won't either.
Right.
Pamela Brown, excellent reporting. Thank you so much. The EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt has come under fire for renting a $50 a night room with lobbyists whose firm was lobbying the EPA. He's also facing questions about pay raises for 2 aides' salaries that were made against the advice of the White House, something Pruitt recently said he didn't know about. And we are now just learning that the man who led Administrator Scott Pruitt's protection detail was taken off that assignment and reassigned when that individual refused to drive with lights and sirens blaring through the streets of Washington, D.C. when this administrator, the administrator of the EPA, was stuck in traffic. That, of course, would have gotten Pruitt around town more quickly, but it is against regulations. That news first reported by CBS News and also confirmed by CNN. My panel joins me now for more on this breaking news. First of all, Kirsten, let me just start with you about this breaking news about there's so many issues of breaking news, but this one about the fact that he had somebody in charge of his security detail and he wouldn't turn on the lights and sirens to get through traffic more quickly, and that person has been reassigned. A headline originally with CBS, we've now confirmed it. This is another headline. Could this be a problem for Pruitt or not?
Well, it should be a problem. I mean, a lot of the behavior that you outline there is sort of the swampiest of behavior, right? It's this very entitled attitude that you come into the government and everybody's sort of there to do your bidding and you're above the regular people, which is what I thought Donald Trump was running against. So you would think that it would be something that he would find offensive, but based on our other breaking news, it sounds like maybe not.
And you were talking, David, about a reason why President Trump might want Scott Pruitt to be the Attorney General.
Sure. So at the conclusion of Director Mueller's investigation, the special counsel investigation, he turns his report over to the Attorney General. Sure, it'd make a lot of sense if you replace the Attorney General with someone who you just saved from another job and in a inauspicious demise and put him in as Attorney General. That being said, the EPA administrator has been very effective at his job. Other than the distractions, he's been doing an incredible job for the administration, and replacing him would be pretty tough.
What do you make of all this?
Well, the first thing you learn in conservative politics is the most formidable opposition that you have is the environmental left. They're better organized, better funded, they run better campaigns, and if you are on the right and you are trying to make significant inroads against their agenda, you are the #1 target. And I think what Scott Pruitt has experienced here this week and last week is a perfect example of a very well-organized campaign against him. And let me just say this. If we're talking about low rent, and we're talking about sirens on a car, and we're talking about him giving raises to his staff salary, I mean, that, in the grand scheme of things, this is amazing that we're having the conversation about whether he should be replaced at all. In a conservative point of view, he's done his job absolutely, exactly how he said he was going to do it.
So you don't think people need to follow rules if they're doing your agenda? Is that what you're saying? He didn't get the ethics approval that he needed to get in order to do this, and he only got the ethics approval.
You're talking about for the staying at the house of a lobbyist.
With a lobbyist, which is obviously inappropriate, and he didn't get ethics approval. He then went, when he found out it was going to be a problem, he went and sort of steamrolled it and made them do an ethics approval, which they now have come out and said they had to do too quickly. There was information that they didn't have, such as his daughter was actually staying there, so that would normally cost you more than $50. I mean, you don't find it troubling that somebody is renting from a lobbyist?
$50 a night is not a standard rate in Washington.
Do I love the optics? Absolutely not. I hate the optics of it. But I think if you're suggesting that Scott Pruitt, who's had a demonstrated lengthy record in the public sphere,
he gets to do whatever he wants.
No. What he is doing and what he is executing is exactly what he said he would do in his confirmation hearings. It's what the president expected him to do. And the suggestion that he's somehow doing it because of a $50 rent is insane.
I think the Pruitt problem here is not one fatal blow, but is he going to bleed out over time? That's the issue, right? None of these are fatal. He's doing a great job. Finding a replacement is going to be tough, but the question is, does he bleed out? You serve at the pleasure of the president until you don't.
I do think that the larger issue here is that the president's still talking about replacing the Attorney General, whether it's with Scott Pruitt or with not. You could argue that Scott Pruitt is doing a great job enacting President Trump's agenda. You could also argue that about Attorney General Sessions, who is doing that. It's just that he has disappointed President Trump when it comes to the Russia probe.
Right, but the point is that President Trump ran on something much bigger than just in the environmental.
In fact, hold that thought, because I want to play, it was a contentious interview with Fox News' Ed Henry, when he was asked if Pruitt was asked if his behavior lived up to the drain the swamp ideal. Take a listen.
President Trump said he would drain the swamp. Is draining the swamp renting an apartment from the wife of a Washington lobbyist?
I don't think that that's even remotely fair to ask that question.
Well, Ed Henry is obviously controlled by the environmental left, right? I mean, that's the only reason you would ask that question, which I want to get back to the idea that the environmental left is making him behave this way. I mean, there's also the issue of this trip that he took to Morocco, which cost $100 and something thousand, which he's been questioned about. I mean, this is not what you're supposed to be spending taxpayer dollars on.
It's just a total cherry picking. We already know. What you just said with those trips with Morocco. There's been a dozen stories since then that suggest that those exact same trips were taken by his predecessors in the Obama administration. Again,
it's not a question of taking the trip.
Effort.
It's a question of, they said that there was a 1-hour meeting on each day, so it's a question of whether or not you're actually working. The point is, President Trump said he was going to drain the swamp. And for you to blame the environmental left for the behavior of one of the cabinet members, I mean, doesn't make any sense.
Now that we've done a segment on a $50 rent, that's what I'm. That's
well, $50 a night is
from a lobbyist.
From a lobbyist it's pretty questionable behavior. You would concede that.
It's absolutely, optics are terrible. But the suggestion that that's why he's doing the job the way he's doing, I think, is nuts.
What do you think about the idea of President Trump replacing Jeff Sessions with Scott Pruitt? How does that sit with you?
I don't like the idea of replacing any of the cabinet secretaries, and let me tell you why. Because we've got a 1-vote majority right now in the United States Senate, and you've got a very thin majority when it comes to controversial issues that pop up in environmental segments and certainly in the Department of Justice. I mean, I think we're probably in an era where you couldn't confirm Bobby Kennedy to be a Department of Justice, to run the Department of Justice.
You also have 3 incredibly giant battles coming up on the Hill, right? So you have Secretary of State, you have the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and a CIA director, which are going to not go without some bumps, is my guess.
So it's just a question of the number of battles?
I think what's the bandwidth the Senate has as well, right? I mean, there are a certain number of calendar days. We'll have to have hearings, and you're up against congressional recess in the summer. People are going to get out of here to campaign in October. And you run out of days. And so to get all those folks have hearings and confirmed, and I will say this, the Democratic minority is doing a very good job of burning all their time on, bringing these nominees to the floor. It's really inside baseball, but they take 30 hours on each nominee to bring them up for the lowest level nominee to come to the floor to a vote. They're burning up time and doing a great job of stalling. So
Kirsten, what David said was that he could see the argument of replace Sessions with Pruitt. You're saving Pruitt's job, which it's not clear right now that he's going to be able to hold on to very long. And then all of a sudden, Mueller is issuing a report, and it's in Pruitt's hands. Does that alarm you?
Yes. I mean, that's the idea. You don't think that's good, right? I mean,
I was pulling the string. Jake said, "Why do you think this might happen?" I was hypothesizing why it might happen.
Yeah, we would like to. I think we need a real investigation. I think Jeff Sessions is somehow too biased to oversee the Justice Department. I mean, what world are we living in?
Listen, that nobody in America believes that the director Mueller is not doing an incredibly thorough investigation. I assure you that he is doing an incredibly thorough investigation. This is evidenced by the stopping of Russian oligarchs and seizing their phones and going through their suitcases. So the notion that he's not doing an investigation is just not won't hold any water. What happens in that investigation is given to the Attorney General, then he issues a report based upon that. And what I think is going to happen here is that Mueller, you can't. He's a constitutionalist, going to look. He can't indict the president. The way to remove the president is through impeachment. He's going to give a report to the Attorney General. It's up to the Attorney General then to determine what happens. The Attorney General hands it off to Rod Rosenstein because he's recused. And there's the question mark.
But you're saying that Rosenstein and Pruitt might do different things.
Oh, I believe so, yeah.
What about how would the base react to Sessions being removed? I mean, we hear a lot about the fact that he's so popular and he's carrying out so many initiatives that the base cares about. I mean,
I think I agree. Look, removing any cabinet secretaries, any more transition before the midterms, I think is not helpful.
One of the things that's also unusual about the idea that President Trump is saying this privately, that he might want to replace Sessions with Pruitt, is that Hogan Gidley, the deputy press secretary, just earlier today was asked about Pruitt, and he was less than optimistic in his response. Take a listen.
I can't speak to the future of Scott Pruitt. I can just talk about where we are now, and that is that the White House is aware of these reports. We're obviously looking into those. We don't have any announcements to make as regards to staffing right now, but we're aware. And, we believe that some of these questions need to be answered.
I mean, that's not a ringing endorsement.
Well, no, I mean, I think Hogan's doing his job there. I think we've seen over the last 2 weeks that this president has made some impulsive moves, and you can't be entirely sure when you're speaking on his behalf if you're on solid ground from moment to moment. So I have no fault with that answer.
Well, you serve at the pleasure of the president until you don't.
Indeed. Everyone stick around. We have a lot more to talk about. Not only did President Trump just seem to repeat his claim that Mexican immigrants are rapists, but he just took it one step further. That's next. Stay with us.
The Lead.
President Trump this afternoon defending his order to send National Guard troops to the southern border, insisting there will still be a wall and even that the military will help build the wall. President Trump returning to the same type of rhetoric that he used when he launched his presidential campaign in June 2015, using terms that immigrant communities might find offensive, such as anchor babies or chain migration, saying that women coming to the U.S. are being raped, quote, at levels nobody has ever seen before, unquote. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is at the White House. And Jeff, I thought that this trip to West Virginia was about President Trump promoting tax cuts and tax reform.
Jake, that's what Republican leaders thought as well. That is exactly why he went to West Virginia, the home of one of the most competitive Senate races. And it got off to a start about the tax plan, what Republicans hoped the president would talk about for the next several months. Instead, he reverted to one of the old standbys of his campaign, immigration, and bluntly, the word rape. Mr. President, tell us about the border plan. President Trump traveling to West Virginia today to sell his tax plan.
So now, once again, you see that America is open for business. One of the big things is our tax cuts.
But within moments, he moved on from the biggest legislative achievement of his presidency to his biggest obsession, illegal immigration.
Remember my opening remarks at Trump Tower when I opened? Everybody said, oh, he was so tough. And I used the word rape. And yesterday it came out where this journey coming up, women are raped at levels that nobody's ever seen before. They don't want to mention that. So we have to change our laws. And the Democrats, what they're doing is just, it's insanity. Nobody understands what's going on.
The president, who used the word rape when first announcing his bid for the Oval Office, also going back today to old and unproven claims about voter fraud.
In many places, like California, the same person votes many times. You probably heard about that. They always like to say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Not a conspiracy theory, folks. Millions and millions of people.
Election officials, Republicans and Democrats alike, have dismissed this as a hoax. Consumed by the president's fury over illegal immigration, the White House is now scrambling to implement his plan to send National Guard troops to the U.S.-Mexico border.
We're going to have our wall, and we're going to get it very strongly. The military is going to be building some of it, but we're going to have very strong borders, and we have to change our laws, and we're working on doing that.
But a question remains unanswered. Why now, when even the president acknowledges arrests at the border are down? Because of the Trump administration's actions, border crossing are still at an unacceptable 46-year low, the president writing on Twitter. That figure from the president is true. There are fewer arrests for illegal border crossings than at any point since 1971, according to the Department of Homeland Security. Arrests are 25% lower than in 2016. Republican governors largely voiced support for the plan, while Democrats like Congressman Ruben Gallego blasted it as blatantly political.
It's using our National Guard's troops who are greatly trained. You're going to pull them out of their private lives to essentially go and try to solve a political problem. This is a failing presidency.
So even with so many questions here about that plan to send National Guard troops to the border, one thing is clear, Jake. The president clearly making the decision to double down on illegal immigration as a theme of this midterm election campaign. He wants to get conservatives, his base, back in his corner. Of course, this all comes after conservative backlash saying he was not doing enough on immigration. The question here is how this resonates with some of the voters Republicans are trying to hold on to, those suburban voters out there in the country who could hold the key to the House and the Senate remaining in Republican control. Jake?
All right, Jeff Zeleny at the White House, thanks so much. And we're going to dive more into the reality at the border in a moment, including a trip down there. But first, I want to bring back my political panel to talk about this. So, David, he's never going to stick to script, right? I mean, like, you have the tax cuts. You've been talking about the tax cuts. You're on message. You come here and you have your list. And
but I'm not the president. I don't have that luxury, right?
You don't have the luxury, but I mean, wouldn't it be better for him?
No. Listen, if the way he got elected was being exactly like this. He cut through an incredibly crowded Republican field and political neophyte by throwing the script in the air and doing exactly what he's doing. People voted for this. That's what they want. The same viewers that are looking at Roseanne are looking at him right now, and they love it.
You're eye rolling.
Oh, no, I wasn't that. I think that's true. I think that is what he got elected for.
But don't you think? But I mean, you think it's not wise necessarily?
I think his base likes it. I'm less concerned about him throwing away the script than I am with what he said when he threw away the script. Such as how he was talking about, the Mexican rapists. And I think it was such a misrepresentation of what is happening, sort of conflating these issues of remember when I said that all these Mexicans are rapists, and then people are getting raped on their way here, so therefore all Mexicans are rapists, when in fact what's happening is, it's true, a lot of women do get raped, girls get raped on their way to the United States, but it's because they're being brought up by these coyotes. And there needs to be a better process for people to get into the country. We don't want them being smuggled into the country. We don't want them making these horrible journeys, which they're doing because they're fleeing violence.
Right, the human trafficking, those individuals are the ones doing the rape. It's not the people in the caravan, for example, were mostly women and children.
And I would just say that the notion that somehow using the National Guard to help protect the border is somehow it's novel. I mean, President Bush did it in 2006.
Obama did it.
Yeah, Obama did it in 2012. Bush had 6,000 soldiers. This is all governed by the Posse Comitatus Act, which says troops can't be used to enforce the law. They can be used to help, protect the border, but they're not going to be arresting folks. They're going to be used to supplement the folks that are on the border there. It's clearly laid out. It's been done before. I don't think it's controversial at all.
A difference, though, that's completely true. It's been done before. But a difference, Josh, is that when Bush did it, when Obama did it, there was a process, interagency discussion, consultation with Congress, consultation with Mexico, as opposed to the president. This seems like a much more impulsive decision. The president seeing something on Fox and Friends, saying that he wants to do this, and then the Department of Homeland Security and others trying to make it a reality.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think that should be anybody should be taken by surprise that this president takes border security very seriously. So, I mean, I think the idea that there's anybody over at Homeland Security who's still questioning his commitment to the border, of course they...
Fair enough.
But I think bringing this back to the politics for a minute, I think what David said is absolutely true in that the base does react to all of this. They're not going to love constant talk of tax cuts. They're going to want to talk about some of the things that got President Trump elected in the first place, and I think that's what he's doing. There's an interesting, I guess, conversation to have about whether this is ultimately just a base election, because if it's a base election, then that stuff works well. If it's not, which we saw in Pennsylvania, and we saw in Alabama, and we saw in Virginia, suburban voters are running for the hills. And so there's got to be a melding of those two things for Republicans. They've got to use the energy the president brings with base voters, but they also have to talk about tax cuts. They really do.
And Kirsten, the president once again bringing out this canard that millions of people voted illegally. Obviously, there are fraudulent votes that happen in every election cycle, but there is no evidence, according to Republican and Democratic officials, that millions of people voted illegally.
Nope. There is not. I mean, I don't know how we. Well, I think
political hyperbole, shocking, right?
I mean, hyperbole. I mean, he's telling people that millions of people voted illegally.
I mean, today's a campaign event, right? I mean, that's what it is, and he's trying to rally the base. I do agree with you. The less he talks about the accomplishments, the less he talks about all the money. Like, he's in West Virginia. The West Virginia auditor did an audit in West Virginia, and $50 billion, some gigantic number is going to go into the West Virginia economy there. President should be talking about that and how that's going to be spread.
Yeah, but why are you saying it and he's not?
I'm just saying, I agree with you, Jake. I'm agreeing with you.
But that's my question.
No, I agree with you. Listen, the president should be touting his own success. He's doing great things.
Why can't he get them excited without making up things?
He's not making up his campaigning.
Millions of illegal votes is not true.
You're like, it's not true, but that's what they want to hear.
Anyway, stick around. Russia running wild, now rubbing it in the world's face. What just went down at the United Nations over the poisoning of an ex-spy on British soil? That story next.
Saturday. American Dynasties, The Kennedys, Sundays at 9 on CNN.
In our world lead today, Russia clearly emboldened, warning the UK, quote, they are playing with fire and they will be sorry, unquote. In a Security Council meeting at the UN just minutes ago, Russia blasting the UK's claim that Moscow is responsible for the poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter on British soil, calling it a, quote, coordinated campaign to delegitimize Russia. Shockingly, it was Russia itself that had called for the meeting at the UN Security Council. Britain's foreign secretary called that action a gambit, tweeting, quote, "The world will see through this shameless cynicism," unquote. CNN senior international correspondent Matthew Chance is live in Moscow for us. And Matthew, the U.S. and U.K. representatives to the UN called Russia's claims absurd. Is anything actually likely to happen because of this meeting, though?
Well, I think they're right in that this is Russia refusing to back down over these allegations that it was behind the Skripal poisoning in Britain. Remember, Moscow faces diplomatic isolation over this issue and has responded with increasingly heated denials and increasingly heated rhetoric. All this comes as one of the victims in the Salisbury poisoning, Yulia Skripal, speaks out for the first time from her British intensive care ward. Today, the first statements from Yulia Skripal, now awake after surviving the nerve agent attack meant to kill her and her father, Sergei, in Salisbury, England last month. I woke up over a week ago now, and I'm glad to say my strength is growing daily, she wrote.
Это Юлия Скрипаль. Ой, Юлька, ты, господи, я слышу по голосу, что это ты, я понять не могу.
Yulia's cousin claims she recorded this unauthenticated phone call with Skripal on Wednesday and handed over the audio to Russian state television.
Все, я скоро выписываю, все окей.
The call has not been confirmed by CNN, but in it, an update on Yulia's father.
Все нормально, сейчас отдыхает, спит.
The former Russian spy remains in critical condition as an emboldened Kremlin called a UN Security Council meeting today, rejecting all blame.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't even know what to say about this. It's some sort of theater of the absurd.
Russia's anger has been fueled by the British government's allegation that the weapons-grade nerve agent used in the attack was made in Russia. The British Foreign Office tweeted the same conclusion, but quickly deleted it. Scientists who examined the nerve agent say they never identified a source. Soon, Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman took to Facebook. The UK now has its own test tube of shame, she says. Liars. Britain stands by its assessment, but British officials say that the allegations were fabricated, designed to discredit Russia.
The so-called Skripal case became a pretext, an imaginary or staged one, for a groundless mass expulsion of Russian diplomats, not only from the US and Britain, but also from a number of other states.
The foreign minister spoke as 60 expelled American diplomats departed Moscow, part of a tit-for-tat response by Russia. As relations between the Kremlin and the West worsen, the Trump administration is also threatening to sanction Russian oligarchs coming to the US over their involvement in the American presidential election. As for the Skripals, Russia's ambassador to the UK was all smiles today at news of Yulia's survival, even offering an invitation home.
Really happy, and I'm quite sure that one day Yulia will come back to Moscow, where she has job, partners.
Right, well, it's not clear at this point, Jake, how keen Yulia Skripal will be to resume her life back in Russia. British officials say that they've offered her the opportunity of a consular visit from Russian diplomats in Britain, but so far they say she has not agreed.
All right, Matthew Chance in Moscow for us. Thank you so much. What are the odds that former KGB agent and now Russian President Vladimir Putin knew about the poisoning? We'll talk to our panel of experts next. Stay with us. We're back with the breaking news in our world lead. Russia now accusing the UK and its allies of manufacturing claims that Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin were behind the poisoning of an ex-Russian spy on British soil. And Russia vowing there will be consequences. I want to bring in my panel of experts. Julia, assuming that Russia was behind the attacks, which is the assumption of the British government, the French government, the American government.
Well, I'd say it's more than an assumption at this point.
Okay,
sure.
Assuming that it's true, based on your knowledge of the Russian government, would Putin have known about the operation? Would he have had to have signed off on it?
Probably. But I think at this point, Russia can't possibly back down. Russia can't possibly say, you know what, jig is up, we did it, that was us, sorry about that. They have to maintain this posture of denial, and they have to maintain the posture that they're being punished unfairly, and that the West is not in a position to punish them, because who punishes? A parent. maybe somebody who's a boss. So Russia's trying to show that they're equal, that they're peers, and that they can call this meeting, they can roll out their side of the story, as crazy as it is. Today we heard about, the Russians officially asked for information about the health of Sergei Skripal's guinea pigs and cats to see if they were also poisoned.
To see if they were also poisoned.
Correct. This was an official information request from the Russian government.
So, Michael Allen, today American diplomats were seen leaving Russia on buses, part of the expulsion that's followed Russian diplomats being expelled from the U.S. But in either case, in both cases, I should say, there is no reduction in diplomatic staff. It's just the individuals they're kicking out are being kicked out, but still 60 more Russian or American diplomats can come in. So how significant is this expulsion of diplomats?
It's significant enough in that if we are taking down serious intelligence officers and getting them out of the game, thereby freeing up some FBI resources, it is significant. But look, this has happened for decades. They're just going to rebuild. They, by all accounts, have the highest number of intelligence officers in Washington and around the United States than even during the Cold War. I mean, this is
they have more now than during the Cold War.
Yeah, this is an open congressional testimony. They are more aggressive than they ever have been. And so that speaks to a lot about what we need to do here in the United States in terms of monitoring who's here and what they're doing.
And Julia, here's how longtime Putin critic and Russian chess champion Garry Kasparov responded to the news that the U.S. and the Russians could replace the expelled diplomats because there was no order to reduce diplomatic staff. He tweeted, quote, "The Kremlin was boasting and laughing about this on Russian TV 2 days ago. Putin enjoys showing there's no limit to the humiliation Trump will accept from him, helps him rally his gang facing sanctions." Is that right?
I think it's a little bit overstated, but I think it's true that this is, not as bad as it seems. What's ironic, I think, and probably not that ironic given how Putin maneuvers when this happens, he tends to punish his own people. So, for example, the St. Petersburg consulate was closed. There has been a massive staff reduction across the American diplomatic presence in Russia. So a lot of Russians now have a really hard time getting an American visa. And who wants to go to America from Russia? It's the most pro-American, pro-Western Russians who tend to not like Putin. So this is just another way to get his shot at them in.
And Michael, we learned that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has questioned some Russian oligarchs who have visited the United States about funneling money to support President Trump's campaign, even going so far as to remove information from their cell phones. So that is the other subtext of all of this, is what the Russians did in 2016.
I think one of the legacies of the Mueller investigation, aside from the indictments, which are very important, and we got to get to the bottom of it, they're going to uncover a vast network of Russian activity, not just traditional Cold War-like spying, but money and funds and covert influence and manipulation of internet platforms and the rest. And so, this is a partisan issue. We can all have our different views on collusion or not, but I'm really glad that there's a team of people going through this so that we can educate not just the American people, frankly, but the international community.
And quickly, the Trump administration expected to sanction some oligarchs who have ties to Putin because of their election interference campaign.
They were supposed to do that quite a while ago, and they didn't, because there tends to be this kind of bifurcation. We have the Trump administration and Trump himself, and we have the Trump administration saying, for example, on your phone call with Putin, do not congratulate Putin.
Right, all caps.
What does Trump do? He congratulates Putin. And, say something about the poisoning. What does Trump do? He doesn't say anything about the poisoning. And unfortunately, this creates a huge opening for the Russians to manipulate and exploit.
Michael, Julia, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Today, referring to a caravan of migrants heading to the U.S., President Trump said women are being raped at levels nobody has ever seen. Is that true? We're in Mexico getting the facts and speaking with those on the journey. Stay with us. We're back with the breaking news in our world lead. Russia now accusing the U.K. and its allies of manufacturing claims that Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin were behind the poisoning of an ex-Russian spy on British soil. And Russia vowing there will be consequences. I want to bring in my panel of experts. Julia, assuming that Russia was behind the attacks, which is the assumption of the British government, the French government, the American government.
Well, I'd say it's more than an assumption at this point.
Okay,
sure.
Assuming that it's true, based on your knowledge of the Russian government, would Putin have known about the operation? Would he have had to have signed off on it?
Probably. But I think at this point, Russia can't possibly back down. Russia can't possibly say, you know what, jig is up, we did it, that was us, sorry about that. They have to maintain this posture of denial, and they have to maintain the posture that they're being punished unfairly, and that the West is not in a position to punish them, because who punishes? A parent, maybe somebody who's a boss. So Russia's trying to show that they're equal, that they're peers, and that they can call this meeting, they can roll out their side of the story, as crazy as it is. Today we heard about, the Russians officially asked for information about the health of Sergei Skripal's guinea pigs and cats to see if they were also poisoned.
To see if they were also poisoned.
Correct. This was an official information request from the Russian government.
So, Michael Allen, today American diplomats were seen leaving Russia on buses, part of the expulsion that's followed Russian diplomats being expelled from the U.S. But in either case, in both cases, I should say, there is no reduction in diplomatic staff. It's just the individuals they're kicking out are being kicked out, but still 60 more Russian or American diplomats can come in. So how significant is this expulsion of diplomats?
It's significant enough in that if we are taking down serious intelligence officers and getting them out of the game, thereby freeing up some FBI resources, it is significant. But look, this has happened for decades. They're just going to rebuild. They, by all accounts, have the highest number of intelligence officers in Washington and around the United States than even during the Cold War. I mean, this is
really more now than during the Cold War.
Yeah, this is an open congressional testimony. They are more aggressive than they ever have been. And so that speaks to a lot about what we need to do here in the United States in terms of monitoring who's here and what they're doing.
And Julia, here's how longtime Putin critic and Russian chess champion Garry Kasparov responded to the news that the U.S. and the Russians could replace the expelled diplomats because there was no order to reduce diplomatic staff. He tweeted, quote, "The Kremlin was boasting and laughing about this on Russian TV 2 days ago. Putin enjoys showing there's no limit to the humiliation Trump will accept from him, helps him rally his gang facing sanctions." Is that right?
I think it's a little bit overstated, but I think it's true that this is, not as bad as it seems. What's ironic, I think, and probably not that ironic given how Putin maneuvers when this happens, he tends to punish his own people. So, for example, the St. Petersburg consulate was closed. There has been a massive staff reduction across the American diplomatic presence in Russia. So a lot of Russians now have a really hard time getting an American visa. And who wants to go to America from Russia? It's the most pro-American, pro-Western Russians who tend to not like Putin. So this is just another way to get his shot at them in.
And Michael, we learned that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has questioned some Russian oligarchs who have visited the United States about funneling money to support President Trump's campaign, even going so far as to remove information from their cell phones. So that is the other subtext of all of this, is what the Russians did in 2016.
I think one of the legacies of the Mueller investigation, aside from the indictments, which are very important, and we got to get to the bottom of it, they're going to uncover a vast network of Russian activity, not just traditional Cold War-like spying, but money and funds and covert influence and manipulation of internet platforms and the rest. And so, this is a partisan issue. We can all have our different views on collusion or not, but I'm really glad that there's a team of people going through this so that we can educate not just the American people, frankly, but the international community.
And quickly, the Trump administration expected to sanction some oligarchs who have ties to Putin because of their election interference campaign.
They were supposed to do that quite a while ago, and they didn't, because there tends to be this kind of bifurcation. We have the Trump administration and Trump himself, and we have the Trump administration saying, for example, on your phone call with Putin, do not congratulate Putin.
Right, all caps.
What does Trump do? He congratulates Putin. And, say something about the poisoning. What does Trump do? He doesn't say anything about the poisoning. And unfortunately, this creates a huge opening for the Russians to manipulate and exploit.
Michael, Julia, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Today, referring to a caravan of migrants heading to the U.S., President Trump said women are being raped at levels nobody has ever seen. Is that true? We're in Mexico getting the facts and speaking with those on the journey. Stay with us.
This was going to be my remarks. It would have taken about 2 minutes, but that would have been a little boring. Now I'm reading off the first paragraph and said, this is boring. Come on, we have to tell it like it is.
All right, President Trump throwing out his remarks that were prepared at what was supposed to be a tax reform roundtable this hour in West Virginia. Instead, he repeated two falsehoods, kind of changing one of them. One was about Mexican migrants. The other one was on voter fraud. I want to bring in now CNN political commentator Van Jones. He also hosts the Van Jones Show on CNN. And CNN political commentator Ben Ferguson, a conservative talk radio host, with us as well. Okay, the president addressed the topic of rape when it comes to Mexican migrants. This was really it'll evoke some of what he said when he was declaring his candidacy, but it's also got a very key difference from what he said then. Let's listen.
And remember my opening remarks at Trump Tower when I opened. Everybody said, oh, he was so tough. And I used the word rape. And yesterday it came out where this journey coming up, women are raped at levels that nobody's ever seen before. They don't want to mention that. So we have to change our laws.
All right, Ben, so first up, I want to credit Josh Green, our contributor, who pointed this out. He's conflating two different things. In his remarks when he was declaring his candidacy, he was saying Mexicans are rapists, that some Mexican migrants are rapists. Here he's talking about Mexican migrants being rape victims. Why is he rehashing this and also twisting it into something different? Why is he doing that while he's on this trip to West Virginia?
Well, I think his point, his intent is to make it clear that we have to have a secure border, and many of the people that come across this border, whether it be with coyotes and the people that they end up hiring, unfortunately do heinous